Hello, it's Reija and welcome to my review of In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. Carmen Maria Machado is of Cuban descent and this book is her memoir detailing her experience with an abusive relationship, how she got into it, how she found it difficult to leave and how she coped after the relationship ended. And it is a very interesting book that doesn't read like your standard memoir. First of all, it isn't fully in chronological order, it kind of skips around. And second of all, it uses media analysis and fairy tales as a lens through which to examine and deconstruct the abuse and the abusive cycle that was her relationship to this woman that is never named. She is only called the woman in the dream house, which in and of itself is a sort of age-old fairy tale trope. Basically, you have this character that is only referred to by something that they are rather than by their real name. And it's also interesting because I feel like there is power in naming your abuser in a sense, and I feel like not only does she refrain from using her abuser's name as a way to protect herself legally, but I feel like it's also a clever way to give less power to that person. That person doesn't have any more power over her because she doesn't even get a name. The experience of that relationship is more important to discuss than the actual person. And I found this book to be very evocative and powerful. First of all, I think that domestic abuse and abuse between queer couples especially is not discussed often enough. I remember when I was a teenager and I watched shows like Revolutionary Girl Utena and Sailor Moon. Those were the only types of media that I had to sort of figure out myself. And when I got into relationships, I realized that they weren't as fantastical and as magical as those shows had led me to believe. And I didn't have language or vocabulary to really understand what was happening to me when those relationships turned abusive. So I feel like this type of book is very important as a tool for queer adults and queer youth to sort of discuss things that are happening in the community and that may or may not happen when you get into a relationship. I think it is important that we talk about our joy and have those happy stories, but I think it's also equally important to have stories that deal with some of the darker aspects, especially stories told by actual queer authors themselves. So yeah, I was very happy reading this book. Well, happy is the wrong word. I was very intrigued. First of all, Carmen Maria Machado uses different narrative tools to get her point across. First of all, she uses both the first person narration and the second person narration. And when she uses first-person narration, it is to draw a line of distance between herself and the relationship. So when she is talking about things that are happening in the present, or things that are happening way in the past before she knew the woman in the dream house, she uses first-person narrative structure. But when she is talking about the actual relationship, things that are happening in the relationship, she is addressing herself as a second-person narrator. So things are happening to you. And it's sort of like makes you as a reader empathize and connect with those scenes more, but it's also a kind of chastisement from the author to her older self. Like, why couldn't you leave? And like, did you notice these things? And it is sort of like an interrogation. I thought that it was really interesting. Secondly, she uses a lot of media criticism and media deconstruction. She uses a specific episode from Star Trek Next Generation to go through a sort of cycle of abuse and gaslighting and what that is like, and then projects it to her own experience. She does a similar thing with the movie Gaslight and the history of how that movie came to be, and all the drama that went with it. There was a very short vignette, a very short chapter called Dreamhouse as an Apocalypse, which talked about how her relationship came to an end in the year 2012, which was also a year that was supposed to be the year of the apocalypse, and also coincidentally a year of many a disaster movie. And she kind of goes over these various things that didn't happen, and when you read it and look at it, you realize, oh, these are the plot points of various disaster movies that came out during that time. I thought that it was brilliant. My personal favorite was the chapter that was Dreamhouse as Choose Your Own Adventure. When you are trying to read all of the different variations of that adventure, you are kind of going through that cycle of abuse, of like having to live through that fear and torment and coming back to it. It's kind of like a Groundhog's Day in a sense, and I thought that it was really powerful, and it was a gutting experience. And then there is almost like a literal fairy tale called Dreamhouse as the Queen and the Squid, which kind of goes through this abusive relationship as an animal fable, a sort of fairy tale. And I thought that it was very beautiful. It was almost like a Bluebeard retelling in a sense. And I just found this book to be incredibly poetic and powerful. I feel like there are various parts in that book that I will go back to and reread, and you could just read it from time to time, just dipping in and out, basically. Because the way it is structured, it's told through in these vignettes, these very short chapters. The longest chapters, I think, are like 6 pages, and they kind of have this structure of a literary device or trope, and then the vignette examines her relationship through the use of that literary device. I thought that it was wonderful, and sometimes this book does veer towards pretentious. I wouldn't say that it is necessarily an easy read, especially if you haven't read much of like super poetic prose, or haven't read a lot of literary fiction, because this work is very literary. It definitely has its roots in nerd culture and like geeky media, which I think is very digestible for a general audience, but the way that it is structured and told is very much steeped in literary fiction. And if you are coming to this book from a genre fiction lens, I think that this book may not be the easiest to parse through. So just keep that in mind and take it slow, because I do think that this is a very fantastic novel, and I wish that more people will pick it up and read it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And there you have it. This has been my review of The Dream House. Before I go, I've been using the US cover for the purposes of this review, because that is the cover that I prefer. But if you are going to be looking into a copy of this book, here is the UK cover as well. So these are the covers that are available, and they are the same book. So keep that in mind when you are picking up a copy or asking your library to purchase one. So yeah, this has been my review, and I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you in the next one very soon. Bye bye!